Hi, everyone. Welcome to Progressive Short Takes. I'm your host, Joe Firestone. The title of this short take is Replace Pelosi. It's mercifully brief. That is the title. Okay, so Jimmy Dore has made a suggestion. He's pointed out that the squad is more powerful now, and that given the results of the election in the House, that they have the power to stop Nancy Pelosi from getting the speakership. And he suggested that they ought to threaten to withhold their support and only give it to Pelosi if she allows a floor vote on the Medicare for All bill, H.R. 1384, which is the bill that was introduced into the last Congress by Pramila Jayapal, and which has 119 co-sponsors. Okay, at this point, it is a popular bill. Okay, to me, this seems like a pretty good idea, but I don't think it's good enough. Okay, I think it's a better idea just to say goodbye to Nancy Pelosi and goodbye to her leadership team. The whole of her leadership team, with the possible exception of Catherine Clark, who is at this point the assistant speaker. I'm not going to spend too much time on Catherine Clark. She's a sponsor of she's a co-sponsor of the Medicare for All bill and a co-sponsor of the Green New Deal. She obviously not as centrist, as Nancy Pelosi. The others have been members of the leadership team for some time. They are, shall we say, long in the tooth, says someone who's long in the tooth himself. And so Jim Clyburn, Steny Hoyer, and Nancy Pelosi have all seen better days as leaders, strictly as leaders from the leadership standpoint. But when it comes to policy, all three are extremely conservative when it comes to deficit spending. In fact, the nickname of Nancy Pelosi is actually Pegosi, because she always wants to shackle the hands of Democrats as soon as they get into power in the House by forcing them to specify pay-fors for bills that they want to support and that are good for people and good for the public purpose. But the most important reason why I would like to replace Pelosi is because as a negotiator, she has shown in this past session of Congress that she is incompetent. First of all, she was incompetent in pursuing impeachment against Trump. She tried to impeach him on very narrow grounds, and she overlooked all kinds of crimes that he evidently committed. She could have thrown the book at him if she had. The chances are that it would have persuaded at least some of the Republicans to come over. It might not have succeeded in actually convicting Trump, but at the same time, it's something she should have started at the beginning of 2019, as soon as the Democrats came into office. She should have done it on constitutional grounds, on grounds that Trump was damaging to the Constitution, that he was a moral hazard, that he was committing crimes, and there should have been a full list of crimes without regard for any political considerations as to whether Democrats could be involved in similar behavior. That was neither here nor there. The object in this case was Trump himself, and a moral stand needed to be taken. And of course, when it comes to moral stands, Nancy Pelosi is always absent without leave, always AWL when it comes to moral stands. But I think worst of all, when it came to the CARES Act, she gave Mitch McConnell what he wanted and what he needed. What he needed was a bill that would ensure the bailout of large corporations in America, that would ensure a bailout, of Wall Street. And he got a provision within the CARES Act, which allocated $454 billion that was turned over to the Federal Reserve so it could set up lending facilities for large businesses in case they needed loans to weather the storm of the coronavirus. It turned out they did not need to weather the storm. And the reason why, because when the $454 billion was placed with the Fed, and when the Fed created a lending facility for the $454 billion, it could leverage that $454 billion to nearly $4.6 trillion in lending capacity. So she turned over $4.6 trillion in lending capacity to the Federal Reserve to give Mitch McConnell what he needed, which was a bailout for Wall Street, which was a bailout for the donors, a bailout for the elites. Once he got that, she had no bargaining leverage to get what she needed and wanted in the way of state and municipal lending support. She could not get any more out of Mitch in terms of providing stimulus checks, in terms of providing extensions of the unemployment insurance plus up of $600 a week. What she needed to negotiate there, what she needed actually to negotiate, was support for people for the duration of the crisis and support for their jobs, real payroll protection, with the federal government picking up the payroll cost for the duration of the crisis. And it was suggested in the ABC Act, introduced into Congress by Rashida Tlaib. What she really needed to do was to protect the kind of income that people could live on who were without any support, $2,000 a month per person for as long as the coronavirus crisis actually lasts, and then an extra $1,000 a month for a year after that to allow the economy to recover. Also, the ABC Act as well provided for $1,000 per child support. And when the coronavirus crisis ended, $500 per child for 1 year after that. That would have given people what they needed to ride out the crisis at home and would have saved undoubtedly a lot of cases and a lot of deaths over the summer and later on too, into the fall, since the passage of the CARES Act. Why didn't she get that? Why didn't she get that? Two possible reasons. The first reason is she didn't really want it for some reason. She didn't want to bail out people for very long. She wanted to do something which would keep people quiet for a little while, but leave them in desperate straits as the election approached. I don't know why she might have wanted to do that. I don't really believe that she did want to do that. What I think is that she was incompetent. To her, the CARES Act looked something like this. She was going to get the $600 a week in extra unemployment support for people, which would last until July 31st. So April, May, June, and July. It would last for 4 months. She got that. She also got the $1,200 stimulus bill. Now, calculating, I'm not entirely sure of these figures right now, but she got for her side something between $750 billion and $1 trillion in those two facilities. And she looked at Mitch and she saw that what he was getting was roughly $454 billion for his large corporations. So she probably figured that's a pretty good deal. That's a pretty good deal. I don't think she noticed that what Mitch really got was the money cannon of nearly $4.6 trillion set up through the lending facility, the special purpose vehicle at the Federal Reserve. She didn't understand what that part of the bill said and what it allowed. I don't think she read the CARES Act very carefully. I don't think her people read the CARES Act very carefully. I don't think she consulted with other Democrats on the CARES Act and with their staffs. Did she call Katie Porter and ask Katie what she and her staff thought? Did she call AOC? Did she call Rashida? Did she call anybody with any economic competence to show them the draft of that section of the bill and see if they could figure out what Mitch McConnell was getting? I don't think she did. At that point, people were away from the House due to COVID and fears of COVID. They were at a distance. Nancy Pelosi and her staff were still here. A few others were still here. It was a skeleton crew. I don't think she had the staff she needed to properly evaluate that particular bill. And in her economic incompetence, which, by the way, she reeks of that. It's the only way to explain her Pelosi behavior over all these years, that she doesn't understand federal finance. So she missed this, and she didn't realize that Mitch got $4.6 trillion for his people. And she got only $750 billion to $1 trillion for hers. She didn't understand that. After the bill was passed, when people called her out on it, and when people said, when are you going to get this other stuff that people need? She said, oh, don't worry. Don't worry, there'll be other days. There'll be other ways to negotiate this. What she was saying, in effect, there would be other things that Mitch needed. That was wrong. She did an incompetent analysis of what Mitch needed to do. The only other thing he needed was to have liability for the big corporations relative to COVID, and he's been trying to shove that down our throats since then. That was the only other thing he needed, and that was not enough. That was not enough to get Mitch to come forth with a $2 trillion or $3 trillion bill. She didn't have the bargaining power because she gave it away when the CARES Act was passed. That was incompetent. Her leadership team was incompetent because they didn't see that. She should have resigned. She should resign now because she was that incompetent. And she should be defeated for the speakership because of this gross incompetence. How much has this competence cost us? How much has it cost us, as individuals? If she had incorporated the Automatic Boost to Communities Act into the CARES Act or something similar, she would have gotten each one of us $2,000 a month from April to now. Just speaking as an individual. That is 9 months of support at $2,000 an individual. Nancy Pelosi cost me $18,000 with her incompetence. She cost you, each one of you, $18,000 with her incompetence because she wasn't able to hold Mitch McConnell up for the kind of money that was necessary to pass that for people. How about the unemployed? What has she cost the unemployed? She has cost them, what, $2,500, $2,600 a month for every month the plus up hasn't been there? August, September, October, November, and now December. $2,400 a month, every month for every one of those individuals. She is personally responsible for that because she blew the negotiations. That's why she needs to be replaced. Now, the squad has the votes to replace her. I don't know what the final count is going to be in the House. Last I looked, it was likely to be 222 to 213. So let's say the Democrats edge into a final seat and it's 223 to 212. So that's the count. So that would mean, if that's the count, if it's 223 to 212, 6 votes would be needed to block her from the speakership. If it's 222 to 213, 5 votes would be needed to block her from the speakership. She needs 218, to get the speakership. The expanded squad has 8 people in it. That's enough to permanently block her. Now, why permanently block her? Why throw the Democratic caucus into disorder? Why have it come together to try to pick somebody else? Because Nancy Pelosi is not only adamant when it comes to Medicare for all, She is adamant when it comes to the Green New Deal. She is adamant when it comes to student loan debt relief. She's going to be tough on all positions, which members of the House may want, but the Biden administration is going to be opposed to. She's going to do whatever Biden wants her to do. That's what she did with Obama. She never went against Obama. She's going to do the same thing with Joe Biden. We need the Congress to be more independent than that. We need a leadership of the Democratic Party that will be open to talking to the progressives. Who are some of the other potential leaders? Well, it could be Barbara Lee would be acceptable to everyone in the caucus. She's a very honest person. She's a trusted person. She's an open person. Could be Karen Bass would be sufficiently popular to get the votes of both the right and the left. Could be Jan Schakowsky would be someone who could do that. Yet another possibility is actually Rosa DeLauro. She led the fight against the TPA and implicitly the TPP and the other trade deals in the House. She was great in that particular context. She's been in the House for ages. She knows everybody. She can organize people. She's a good candidate, and she would be open to talking to progressives. For that matter, she's a co-sponsor of the Green New Deal, for that matter. So, there are just 4 people, okay, I mentioned. Now, it could be Catherine Clark, the assistant speaker. She was a co-sponsor of the Green New Deal, too. I'm sorry, she was a co-sponsor of the Medicare for All bill, and I believe the Green New Deal as well, okay, if I'm not mistaken. And if I'm correct, I don't think that Rosa DeLauro sponsored the Green New Deal, but she was a co-sponsor of the Medicare for All bill. So, there are a number of people. They're not centrist Democrats, in other words, those on the right wing of the Democratic Party in Congress. But there are some I mentioned that are pretty much in the middle of the caucus. There are some other people who are more lefty, like Karen Bass, okay, and Barbara Lee, but who are popular across the caucus and respected across the caucus. I think all the people that I mentioned would be more acceptable than Nancy Pelosi to the squad and to the other members of the progressive caucus, those members of the progressive caucus who are, in truth, fairly progressive. There must be 40 or 50 of them. I think all the people that I mentioned would be acceptable to them. And I think a lot of the problem solvers would be willing to vote for them too. I think a new leader can bring the caucus closer together than the old leader can. We need a new leader who will really lead, not with symbolic gestures, but who will lead on issues, who will lead on content, who will not lead by kneeling with kente cloths on, who will not lead by going like this We need someone who will lead by playing it tough when she or he has to play it tough, and by playing it smart, and by running a continuous campaign for a democratic agenda, a real democratic agenda. I mean, Pelosi was great at fundraising, but she was lousy at campaigning. She was lousy at creating a popular image for the party. I think that has to be part of the speaker's job. We need to get speakers who will do that. We need to get speakers who will speak well. We need to get speakers who can inspire people and who can persuade them that the Democratic Party cares about them, not by manipulating them, but by telling them the truth, that she and the people in the Democratic Party who support her in the House do care about the people. See, I'm assuming the new speaker is going to be a she. I suppose that's because I don't think people will go for Ro Khanna quite yet. He'd be a wonderful speaker, actually. But there are a lot of women who have been in the House, some for a short time and some for a long time, who are very competent. So I'm assuming one of them is going to be the new face of the party. And that's fine. Just let's get someone who can lead with strength and who has a little charisma. That's what we need right now. That's what we need right now. We need Nancy Pelosi to resign. We need her leadership team to resign. It would be better if they did not run at all. Okay, thank you very much. I should say, but some folks, including myself, are organizing a little movement to try to get the squad aboard for this effort, to try to get them to believe in this effort. We'll be tweeting at them for days in order to get the idea introduced. And we'll hope that they will come around. They know that they were not elected to support Nancy Pelosi. They know that their constituents don't want that. But they've been afraid, I think, to try to go against her. It seems to me now is the time to take that chance to set the House on another course, on a course that pressures the Republicans with legislation that is really progressive. And when the Republicans refuse to take it up, if they do refuse to take it up in the Senate, then I think what has to be done is for the Democrats to scream loud and clear and pass it again and again and again, because that will impress on the people that it's that kind of great legislation that the party stands for, that the party wants to pass. You pass the good bills, then you campaign for them if the Senate will not pass them. And you keep on passing the good bills people need. That's what your job is in the House of Representatives. It's the job of the Speaker to lead that effort. So that's it. I'll be back soon with another progressive short take. I hope you liked this one. It wasn't that short, but it wasn't that long either, if some of you have seen some of my in-depth shows. Take care. I'll be back soon.